Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to AMC Movie News and this special Editor's Desk editorial here. My name is John Campea. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of AMC Movie News. And today I want to do just a quick short video editorial on why Guardians of the Galaxy proves that Justice League does not need origin stories. Now, to give you some background on this, a lot of people, when DC announced and Warner Brothers announced that they were going to come out and they were going to do, Batman v Superman and then, probably Justice League movie after that. A lot of people were concerned that Marvel or that DC and Warner Brothers was not following in the Marvel footsteps. Now, of course, the way Marvel went ahead and did this and set up their cinematic universe and ultimately set up the Avengers was they did a big bunch of individual films first. They did Iron Man. They had an Incredible Hulk movie. They did Captain America. They did Thor. And then and only then, did they do the Avengers. Now, this has left a lot of people saying and believing that that is the model, that is the blueprint, if you will, then, that Warner Brothers, DC, needs to follow. So if you're going to do a Justice League movie, the belief has been, first you need to do a Superman movie, you need a Batman movie, you need a Wonder Woman movie, you need a Flash movie, you need an Aquaman movie, you need a Martian Manhunter movie, you need a Cyborg movie, you need, whatever else. You need all those, you need a bunch of individual movies first, and then you do Justice League, and that's the way to do it. Now, I have always contended that just because Marvel did it that way, and it worked awesome, does not mean that is the only way. I have always been of the belief that Warner Brothers should take an opposite approach to it. They have certain characters that need a little bit more of a push than, say, some of the Marvel characters did. Warner Brothers has some characters that need some more of a push. And I've always believed that the best way for Warner Brothers and DC to do this is to start off with team-up and group movies like Batman v Superman with a few other characters or Justice League. And then you build the popularity and recognition of some of your other characters, like your Cyborg, like Wonder Woman, like whatever else. You build up some popularity in that setting so that they can be carried on the shoulders of already established heroes like Batman and Superman on the big screen world. And then you can spin that off and do individual movies after that. And apparently that's the way Warner Brothers and DC is going with it. And I believe it's the right way for them to do it. Now, understandably, some people still have that concern that maybe Warner Brothers is going about it the wrong way. However, I want to point out that I believe that Guardians of the Galaxy just put all those fears to rest. Because, part of the thing is that people say, well, we need to know who Cyborg is. If we're going to appreciate Cyborg in a Justice League cinematic universe, we first need a standalone Cyborg film so we can get to know him, know his whole backstory, then and only then can we appreciate him in a big team-up movie like a Justice League. Same goes for Wonder Woman, same goes for Flash, or whoever else you want to be talking about. But let's look at Guardians of the Galaxy for a second. Guardians of the Galaxy has just kind of come out and smacked that theory right across the cheekbone. Because what do we have? In Guardians of the Galaxy, we have 5 heroes that come together to team up, to have a big team-up movie, Guardians of the Galaxy. And how much backstory or individual films did we need before we had Guardians of the Galaxy? None. Marvel didn't need to have a Peter Quill Star-Lord movie first, followed by a Rocket Raccoon movie, followed by a Drax the Destroyer movie, followed by a Gamora movie, followed by a Groot movie. They didn't need to do all these origin films first before bringing them together and having a big team movie. Why? Because they understood that to really get the essence of who the character is, you don't need a full 2-hour standalone film first. Now, before we talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy specifically, let's go back to X-Men 2. There is a brilliant, wonderful scene in X-Men 2 where Iceman and Rogue and Pyro and Wolverine have gone to Iceman's house, his family's house. And up until this point, we've never really had any backstory or understood much about Pyro. But what Bryan Singer did with this one scene in that house that was so brilliant was he had Pyro standing in the living room, and Pyro looks on the wall and he sees this family portrait of a happy family. And then Bryan Singer brings the camera back to Pyro's face as he's looking at that picture, and a lot of regret and some pain envy, if you will, in Pyro's face. You see, in that one shot, without dialogue, without narrative, without exposition, in that one shot, we learned a ton about Pyro just by a look on his face by looking at that family portrait. We learned a ton about that character. Enough that I don't think we needed any more for the purposes of that story. And then on the story went. You know, Bryan Singer established those things about Pyro so quickly, so rapidly. Now let's get back into Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm going to give some very, very tiny spoilers here. Very, very tiny. Trust me, if you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy yet, what I'm about to say is not going to ruin the movie-going experience for you whatsoever, I promise. But the film starts by giving us a tiny bit of backstory to Peter Quill, Star-Lord, in a quick 2 to 3 minute scene. When we're in the prison in Kiln, we get, you see this part in the trailer when they're doing the lineup, the usual suspects lineup, and John C. Reilly is basically giving a little bit of background on each character. So with Rocket, he talks about subject B2765, whatever his name is, calls himself Rocket. He's this, and he's this, and he's this. There you go. Instead of a 2-hour movie, John C. Reilly, in 15 seconds, gave us the essential background information of Rocket to make what his role is in Guardians of the Galaxy completely applicable, and we didn't need to know anything else. Now, there's another scene later in the movie where Rocket, is hanging out in a bar, and he starts saying, I didn't ask to be made this way, and he sheds a little bit more light on how he came to be. But once again, it's in a quick, 15-second monologue that he's giving. Groot, we get almost no background information on Groot. But we, just through watching the movie, we understand who Groot is. And that's all we needed for the purposes of this cinematic universe. Drax the Destroyer, played by Dave Bautista. We get very little. We get that John C. Reilly lineup. Ever since the murder of his wife and his daughter, he's been on a rampage full of vengeance. And he explains to Gamora, so-and-so killed my wife and daughter. I will have my vengeance, blah, 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 blah. And that's all the background we needed. So, I understand where people are coming from when they say, hey, DC needed to have all these origin movies first, because it's understandable to think that way, because that's what Marvel did, and it worked so well for Marvel. But we got to understand there's more than one way, more than one way to bake a cake, right? Just because it worked for Marvel doesn't mean that's the only way to do it, or that's the only best way for anybody else to do it. I honestly think Warner Brothers and DC is doing the right approach by the way they're doing this. And I hope that if people take a step back and look at this Guardians of the Galaxy situation, a superhero team movie with 0 individual setup movies first. It dove into it, gave us the movie, and it's one of the best movies of the summer, maybe one of the top 10 movies of the year when it's all said and done. When you take that approach with Justice League, you don't need a 2-hour backstory for Aquaman. Have Aquaman in one quick scene talking to somebody. In 30 seconds, he can explain who he is and what his background is, enough to the point that it will suffice for the rest of the narrative of that story. Now, what you can make the argument then, well, Aquaman deserves his own movie. Wonder Woman deserves her own movie. I'm not going to argue against that. That's totally valid point. Of course they deserve their own movies. But that's not the issue. The issue is, do you need to have those movies before jumping into a Justice League or team-up things? I believe Guardians of the Galaxy proves thoroughly, definitively, that no, you don't need to do that first. And I believe the fact that Justice League, this new Warner Brothers DC Cinematic Universe, is not doing that first is not a sign of trouble at all. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy proves that. Anyway, let me know what you think about my whole theory. Jump into the comments section below. Let me know if you agree and why. Let me know if you disagree and why. Let's have some discussion. Anyway, my name is John Campea for AMC Movie News. Thanks for joining me, guys. And until next time, bye-bye.